Welcome to another episode of Food, Nutrition, and Wellness with Dr. Dan Remley. Today he's going to be talking about Meatless Mondays and good food nutrition. So stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of Food, Nutrition, and Wellness with Dr. Dan Remley. Dr. Dan Remley is a field specialist with the Ohio State University Extension Program. Dan, it's always a pleasure talking with you. And what an interesting topic we're going to be talking about today.
Thanks for having me on.
And so Meatless Mondays. Now that's rather an interesting concept. One that basically I have not heard about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a national movement to try to get people to kind of move towards more plant-based diets and eat a little bit less meat. Americans eat way too much meat. We don't really need a whole lot of meat in our diets. I mean, some is good, but if you choose not to eat meat in your diet, that's okay too. There's different ways that we can do this, but yeah. So we need to eat a lot more fruits and vegetables and whole grains. It's kind of the same thing that I normally talk about when I come on your show.
So that's interesting because I have a number of different questions about what is meat and what isn't meat. But I believe you have some slides that you're going to accompany the discussion. And so Meatless Mondays and more, all about plant-based eating. Now, I'm assuming that this is a program that you and Jenny Lobb presented to a number of different individuals.
Yeah, this presentation was actually developed by Jenny. She's my colleague up in Franklin County. We work on some teams together. One is called the Live Healthy, Live Well team. And that does, the Live Healthy, Live Well team has a blog that we do, and we do Facebook posts on different health-related topics. So this is one of our initiatives under that team is we've developed some what we call lunch and learns, just really short, quick presentations, and this is one of those.
So let's talk more about Meatless Mondays and more.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about different types of plant-based diets, and we'll provide some tips and strategies for trying to incorporate more plants into your meals and snacks, give you some examples and that type of thing. Can you think of reasons why people might want to incorporate more plants into their diets, like more fruits and vegetables and whole grains and things like that?
Well, I guess I'm going to go to the backside. Meat has a lot of protein, but it also has a lot of unhealthy aspects if we eat too much. So I'm assuming that the more we move to plants, to fruit, vegetable, it keeps us healthy.
All right, so protein is important in our diets. Protein is, we need protein for our muscles, development of our muscles. And when we repair our muscles, we need protein for our immune system. Our cells have proteins. Everything in our body has, we need protein in our diets. But we can get a lot of those proteins from plants too. So plants such as beans and tofu and those types of foods do have protein. So talk about that. And you're right, there are a lot of our protein animal sources do have that saturated fats that I often talk about. That's not so great for our hearts and our arteries and that type of thing. So another great thing about plants, incorporating more plants, is plants have fiber. And so fiber is also very good for our hearts. It's good if we have diabetes. It's good to have fiber in our diets for our blood sugars and those types of things. So the more plants, more fruits and vegetables and things like whole grains that we can add to our meals and snacks, generally the healthier our diets are, and also that can help prevent things like diseases like hypertension and heart disease and type 2 diabetes and that type of thing. And if you have those problems, it can help manage diabetes, for example. So
are we talking about a vegetarian diet?
No, not necessarily. That's an option for some people, but for many people, we can just kind of scale back a little bit on the meats that we consume, the animal.
I see.
We'll talk about different types of diets, but another reason to incorporate more like beans and plants into our meals is that it can cut down on our grocery bill as well. So if we extend our meat is one of the most expensive foods that we buy when we go to the grocery, different cuts of meats. So there are ways to maybe cut back on the meat or buy less meat, but extend it with protein-based plant foods like beans, for example. So we'll talk about that. So there's benefit besides the health benefits. There's the cost savings benefits of incorporating more plants into our diets. But also a lot of people are concerned about sustainability. So as you know, to produce a pound of meat, it costs an exorbitant amount of water and fertilizer and resources to produce that 1 ounce of meat compared to maybe that 1 ounce of beans too. So, it's a good way to think about sustainability. Certainly, meat is important in our food system, but I think all of us Americans could cut back a little bit on our meat consumption.
It's interesting as we look at our diets and our eating of meat. I often wonder, we as Americans in the United States, are we the ones that consume the most meat, or is it worldwide?
Well, we probably per capita consume probably more meat than most countries do. And I'm thinking especially in maybe Asian countries and many of the developing countries for sure. But as those developing countries start to develop, they also demand those, more meat in their diets as well. So, and that does put a lot of strain on resources and water resources and that type of thing. So, from a sustainability perspective, as our population grows, I think it would benefit us to cut back on that meat consumption. But there are different types of diets, and just want to mention a few plant-based types of diet. We've kind of already been talking about these a little bit. There's the flexitarian diet, and this is plant-based, but occasionally, it's just cutting back on meat. So, maybe it's having a meatless Monday or a meatless Friday. It incorporates all the foods, but it's really a healthy diet, very heavily plant-based. There are vegetarian diets, and there's different types of vegetarian diets. One is the lacto-ovo. So these people eat plant-based foods, but they also do include dairy and eggs in their diets. There's the pescatarian diet, so they only eat plant-based foods, but they include seafood. And then there's the vegan diet, and they don't eat any animal food at all. They do need vitamin B12 supplements if you're going to be strictly vegan. If you don't eat any eggs and dairy, you do need B12 because B12 is only found in animal products. So that's just something to think about if you're going to go vegan. So those are sort of the different eating styles. I would say probably most people are flexitarians, or most Americans eat way too much meat, but people that are sort of cutting back on meat are considered like flexitarians more. And so I know I've talked about this. This is the MyPlate. This is based on the dietary guidelines. And you can see that it's recommended like 3/4 of your plate should be plant-based, right? So we're talking about fruits and vegetables should be about half of our plate. Grains like pasta and bread and cereal and that type of thing. That's only about 1/4 of our plate. And experts recommend that half of those should be whole. So they have a lot more fiber and vitamin and minerals. And then the protein is only about 1/4 of our plate. And that's a small quarter. And so the guidelines say that most adults only need about 6 ounces and about 3 ounces. If you think a deck of cards, that's about a serving size. So, if you go to the restaurant, you buy a 12-ounce steak, about 3 servings of protein. That's not, that doesn't really fit in with the dietary guidelines. But if you cut it up by maybe you'd only eat 1/4 of that steak, that's that's in line with the dietary guidelines. So we really don't need a whole lot of protein. We do need some for sure, but we don't need a whole lot. We don't need.
Dan, it is interesting. We tend to surround our eating around a piece of meat. Like we're going to have pork chops, and then we have a potato and some vegetables. We always consider the meat first.
Right. Yeah, it's we're grown up. Our culture is meat and potatoes culture, so a lot of heavy grains, heavy meat, and then not as much fruits and vegetables. But we need to kind of shift those eating patterns so that we can prevent and delay a lot of these chronic diseases, and so we don't develop these things and these chronic diseases early on in our lives, or if we get diabetes. I think it's a good idea to incorporate more plant-based foods to manage diabetes, or if you have hypertension, to cut down on eat more fruits and vegetables. They have things like potassium, which is good for hypertension. Cutting down on the sodium, the saturated fats and those types of things that are found in those animal products.
Now, cooking vegetables, I'm assuming it's all right to boil them or steam them. Are you mentioning, how we cook them?
That's a good question. Good. So ideally, a lot of vegetables, for example, steaming is probably the best way to cook them because that preserves a lot of the vitamin C and those water-soluble vitamins. When we boil, a lot of times, because vitamin C is water-soluble, we lose a lot of vitamin C when we boil like peas. One thing you can do if you do boil peas is that you can save the water and use that water to cook like rice. And that way you'll have rice with vitamin C in it. So there's some creative ways that you can maintain those nutrients. But yeah, so steaming is very important. But any way you get them is really good. Any way you get your fruits and vegetables is a good thing. Of course, we don't, the fried vegetables, potato chip, technically a vegetable. So, ideally, we don't want our fruits and vegetables to be processed a whole lot. We want to avoid the fruits and vegetables that have a lot of added sugar and fat and salt. And so, the fresher, the better, generally speaking, the less processed. The same with grains, really. So here's some tips for focusing on plant-based eating. Really try to incorporate more vegetables, and so more, especially leafy green vegetables in our diets. Snack on plants, so having carrots with dips, things like that. Adding more protein into more plant-based proteins into our diets, like more beans, whole grains, the tofu, those types of things can be really good. And it's always good to rotate the whole grains too. So I don't know if you've ever experimented with like a bulgur or quinoa. There's lots of different proteins that we as Americans don't eat a whole lot of that we could try to incorporate more into our diets. And then also just setting some. You don't have to go completely. Vegetarian or, you don't have to eliminate all of the meat from your diet, but we can always take small steps and just cut back gradually on the amount of meat that we do consume. So setting goals, like try to have a meatless Monday. Just don't have any meat on Monday. And you were mentioning earlier, Patrick, that you've noted that like the Catholic faith, you have meatless Fridays, right?
During Lent.
Right. So you have so just setting some short, smart goals that are very specific and measurable, and things that you can achieve is a good idea.
Just following on what you were saying, replacing meat on Monday to fish might be an alternative.
Yeah, fish is a really, really healthy protein source. So that's a great idea. We think about sometimes we think about breakfast and we think about protein with breakfast. What comes to your mind?
Sausage, bacon, eggs.
Eggs, yep.
Toast.
Different ideas for breakfast include like grain bowls. And these might be like quinoa bowls with maybe even beans in them. But when I was in Costa Rica, I spent some time. They would have rice and beans for breakfast too. You don't think of that as a breakfast type of food or meal, but yeah, they ate beans with everything, and beans are so healthy. Having different types of oats, putting a little avocado on toast is always an idea. And then having some whole grain waffles rather than the regular waffles, adding a little bit of peanut butter, banana. I mean, you can get on the internet and there's all kinds of healthy breakfast ideas. And sometimes we kind of get in our ruts when it comes to breakfast. Even having vegetables for breakfast, we don't think about, adding avocado to a toast or eating carrots for vegetable. Vegetables are more seen as a lunch or a dinner type of food, but they can certainly be added. Maybe you've had an omelet, which is with eggs and add some peppers and that type of thing. But yeah, certainly vegetables there's lots of great ideas for incorporating vegetables into our breakfast foods or meals. And then for lunch, there's all kinds of wonderful salads that you can make especially with grains. And if you look up grain-based salads, just get on the internet and you can see lots of ideas for like quinoa, adding quinoa and bean and tomato salads kind of mixed together, pasta salads, different pasta salads with lots of grains like bulgur wheat. You can use that and you can incorporate that into your salads. Add a lot of tomatoes and beans and that type of thing. You get on the internet and you Google grain-based salad and you can look at all kinds of different recipes and ideas that might suit your taste. Same thing with like wraps and sandwiches. So, you could have like a cheese sandwich or even like a bean wrap or a chickpea. Chickpeas make really, really good wraps or sandwiches. As I mentioned, the grain-based bowls are good. Different vegetable soups like tomato soups. You can have vegetable pizza. Just don't add the pepperoni and the sausage, but add different vegetables to your pizza. There's all kinds of wonderful recipes for vegetable pizzas out there as well.
Dan, we are also a condiment society.
Yeah.
Every person has at least 20 packets of ketchup, mustard, and different things of that nature. And so we may be eating healthy, but what are we doing with those condiments? A
lot of mustard and ketchup is really high in sodium, and so if you have hypertension, for example, you need to be very mindful. Now, I don't put a whole lot of condiments on my, like on some of the foods like hamburgers, or if I eat a tofu or a meatless hamburger, but so I mean, I'm just thinking of some of the fast food chains that have the meatless hamburgers. I mean, they're probably lower in fat, but they add all those condiments, and by the time you get done, you're really high in your sodium. Mayonnaise can be high in fat too, depending on the type. You can get low fat mayonnaise; that's a better choice. But so yeah, you're right. You can overdo it with condiments for sure.
And what about onions? Sometimes it's really good to cut up. Are onions good for you or bad?
Yeah, onions are considered a vegetable, and they have phytochemicals, and same with garlic, and they're kind of in that same family. And so there's certain phytochemicals that are antioxidants, good for your heart and your arteries, and thought to prevent a lot of those problems like cancer. And so, yeah, onions are great. Now, I'm not talking about the fried onions, like the onion rings and the blooming onions and those types of things, but that we get at maybe restaurants. But onions are certainly very, very healthy to incorporate into your sandwiches and things like that. We can add vegetables like beans to our things like sloppy joe and chili and that type of thing. That extends the meat out. That can save us money and save us money on the grocery bill. But we can replace meats with plant-based protein like tofu. like especially when it comes to a lot of Mexican foods like tacos. You can make bean tacos, bean burritos, or add bean to your taco meat, and then it'll extend the taco meat. There's grain-based salad or skillet meals that we can make. There's vegetarian chili. There's some really good meatless hamburgers out there too. Veggie burgers that it seems like they're getting better and better, in terms of making these veggie burgers. I've had the Impossible burgers that some of the fast food restaurants have. I think they're pretty good. Again, they tend to you go to the fast food restaurants, they tend to put on a lot of the condiments, which makes the burgers not as healthy. But you can certainly find a lot of tasty veggie burgers out there in the supermarket.
So do veggie burgers taste pretty much the same as hamburger, or does it taste more vegetable?
The Impossible burgers are really to me. I can't really tell the difference. I mean, some people can, but I think they're really good. But there is a different taste to them, and sometimes you might, it takes a little bit of getting used to them. But yeah, I think they're pretty good, and I think they're getting better with developing these products too, so that they're more like the real thing. So we know that most Americans eat about 1.5 times protein that we actually need, so that we should be able to cut down on the amount of protein that we consume. There's some good resources I wanted to point out. One is Celebrate Your Plate, and this is one of our extension resources. There's great recipes here, really healthy recipes, and so I would encourage you to check that resource out. And that's you can Google Celebrate Your Plate, and then you can look at all the resources, there's recipes and everything. So that's available. And anyway, that's about the extent of my presentation.
Okay. Well, I have a few questions. One of the questions surrounded fish. The problem is that when we think of fish, we think of some of the large chains where they dip them in batter and process them that way. When you're talking about fish, what's the best way to prepare it? Fry it, boil it, get it.
Yeah. I don't consume a lot of fish. I don't prepare a lot of fish, but generally you want to avoid the fried, because that's the fried fish has that a lot more added trans fat and saturated fat that's really not great for it. So yeah, you do get some of that healthy fish oil, but you're also getting the bad fat too. So yeah, the more you can grill or bake, those are better cooking methods than, or even if you're frying, on the skillet, it's better to use the polyuns, like the vegetable oils, things when you're preparing fish, rather than the frying is probably the least healthy.
I see. And there was a comedian on not too long ago that said they got a piece of chicken from one of the bucket stores, if you want to call it that, and they put it on a napkin and walked away for a half hour, and the napkin was filled with different grease and things of that nature when it came back. And so, when we talk about processing food, most of our diet is around fast food, or not most of us, but when we do go out to eat, we tend to gravitate towards processed food.
Yeah, the less processed, the less we can fry, and a lot of the fast food and a lot of the restaurant food does use a lot of sodium and fat, and that's why it tastes so good.
Yeah.
There are strategies like I just order the smaller hamburger, like not the large hamburger, or order your hamburger without the condiments too, because that'll cut down on like the mayonnaise that they use and all the sodium and the different mustard and ketchup and that type of thing. So there's ways that you can eat healthy when you're, if you're eating out. You can order salads and things like that. Some of the restaurants have like really good, there are good vegetarian options too in a lot of the restaurants. Like I'm thinking Panera has some good, like green salads and things like that. So yeah, there's different options depending on where you live. But and again, I'm one who I think it's okay to splurge every now and then, but just not every day, not not maybe once a week, but do work on those reasonable goals, like have that meatless Monday or Friday, or
Yeah.
start baby steps.
One final question, and we only have about a minute left. But gluten, individuals that are allergic to gluten, many times when they get into pizza, hamburgers, different kinds of foods, etc., the bread, the grains, sometimes have a problem. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you have to really look for if you have those problems. That I'm certainly not an authority and expert on this, but looking for those gluten-free products would be certainly advisable.
That's interesting. Dan, it's always a pleasure talking with you. I learned so much about what I should not be eating.
Oh, I don't mean to.
No, it's you get into it, but
it's cutting back on some foods that we eat and eating more of some others. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah. We're talking with Dan Remley. Dan Remley is a field specialist with the Food, Nutrition, and Wellness program with the Ohio State University Extension program. Dan can be reached, and you'll see on the screen his contact information. If you have any questions, Dan is always willing to answer them. So either email him or contact him by phone. He's always available to help. Dan, thank you very much for an enlightening program.
Thank you.